Alrighty, in that last video we added a player to a map that we made using a tile palette, and we enabled our player to be able to move around, and we're going to now add an enemy for us to interact with, and maybe I'll add some other stuff, maybe like a goal to reach or something. So let's do some of that now. Let's create our enemy. I will again go on pixel art if I could find it. Let's go on pixel art and let's make an enemy creature. So let's do, actually, you know what? Let's make it even simpler for us. Let's just use another one of these sprites that we use for our player. And we'll make this, I'll rename it to enemy. And I can click this color and I can set this one to red. And I'll click my player and I'll just set his color to green. And now my player is green, my enemies are red. I need to add some code to my enemies. Well, first I need to make it so that they interact with physics, so let's give them a rigid body 2D. And we're going to make sure that they are simulated. That means that physics is working on them. They have gravity. I'll add another one. Let's add a, I need to give him a collider. I'll just give him a box collider. So this box around him is going to be his hitbox. And I'm going to add another collider to him. I'm going to give him another box collider. Actually, how do I best do this? I want to basically give him another collider on his head, that when I land on it, it kills him. And I want to make this collider on his body so that when he touches me, he kills me. I'm going to give him a new empty game object inside of him, and I'm going to call this head hitbox. And I'm going to create a new tag. So there's tags. I'm going to create a new tag. I'm going to hit add tag, and I'm going to name this tag death. A little ominous, but that's what it's going to be called. And this head hitbox, I'm going to give this the death tag. What I'm going to make the death tag do is that anytime a collider with the death tag touches our player, the player will just get set back to the start. So I need to give this head hitbox a collider. So I'll give it a box collider 2D. And I don't want the box collider to be the whole size of the entire guy. So I'll move this collider up so it's only at his head. And actually I'm going to change his normal collider to a capsule collider. Actually, I will just make it a little narrower. I'm going to change his collider to fit in with his body more. I could make this even more complicated. I could give him like a sword, and I could just put like his death collider on his sword. Actually, this enemy should be the death one. And then this head hitbox will be untagged. And for this enemy, he has this collider on him. He's tagged with death. If I touch this, I'll die. If I bonk him on the head, then he will die. Should be pretty straightforward. Let's make this head hitbox just a little wider just to be nice to the player. The bigger this hitbox is, the easier it is going to be to kill this enemy. Okay, so this is going to be his head hitbox. If I touch this, he's going to die. This will be his body hitbox. If I touch this, then I'm going to die. His body hitbox is tagged with death, so this whole Unity game object has the death tag. My character, I'll add some code that says on update, if my collider 2D is touching a collider 2D that's tagged with death, then go back to the start. And I need to write some code for his head hitbox so that if this is colliding with, and I'll tag the player as player, I'll create a new tag called player, and it's not adding that tag. Hello, I really need my new tag in. Okay, now my new tag's in. I don't know why that wasn't working. Okay, I have a new tag called player. I'll go into my player, and I'll give him the player tag. Now my player has the player tag, my enemy has the enemy tag. I need to write some code in this head hitbox so that when he touches the player, he despawns. To save myself some time, and also to model to you guys, because I'm not going to have time to teach you all of the programming languages in the world, we're just going to use a tool to do some of the harder stuff for us. So let's say I have a enemy. The enemy has a child game object called head hitbox. This game object contains a collider. I need the enemy game object to deactivate if a game object tagged with player collides with this head hitbox collider. This code can be in a script called head hitbox. This script will be in the head game object. Oh, whoops. Okay, that's okay. Head hitbox. So on trigger enter 2D. If it's touching the player, deactivate the parent. Looks good to me. Looks simple. I'll put that into Unity. So I'm going to go to scripts. I'm going to right click. I'll create a C# script. I'm going to call this head. I'm going to call this enemy head hitbox. So I have my enemy head hitbox script, and what that'll do is inside of my enemy, I place this script inside of his head hitbox, and now if a player touches this hitbox, my enemy should die. Let's test that. Let's see if it works. I'm a player. I see my enemy. I walk over. I'm touching him. Nothing's happening, and it didn't work. Am I tagged with player? Let's do some debugging. My player is not tagged. My player needed to be tagged as a player. Now he's tagged as player. Let me double check my code. Let me make sure that it is the same caps lock. Caps lock is important. What? My file is not saved. Okay, well, that'll also not help me. If you don't save your code, that also is going to be a problem. Okay, now I have my code saved. Compare tag player. My player is tagged as a player now, and all my code is saved correctly. All my code is updated. Now let's try it again. I'm going to hit play. I think if I approach him from the side, my hitbox is big enough that even if I just walk into him from the side right now, no, it doesn't happen. But if I step on top of his head, it doesn't happen either. Okay, so head hitbox, untagged, enemy is tagged as death, player is tagged as player, head hitbox. Let's view this code again. Let's do a debug statement. A debug statement will let me see if this code is triggering or not. So debug .log player has killed an enemy. So now if I trigger this code, it should report to me in my console, and it should let me know that my player has killed my enemy. I don't know what system diagnostics is. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't know where that came from. I didn't write that. You can look back in the video. I never wrote that. That wasn't in any of my code. That caused an error. I don't know why it's there. Okay. So now I have my player. There's my enemy. I'm going to bonk on his head. And it looks like I'm not colliding with his head. A no reference exception. Object reference not sent to an instance of an object. Oh, where did I do that? Movement settings, script, player controller. This is on, so it's giving me an error on line 205 of this Unity engine code, which I don't want to be looking at right now. I have absolutely no clue why this is giving me an error. Okay, but it doesn't matter. On trigger, enter 2D. Oh, I see what's happening. I finally figured it out. My head hitbox is not flagged as a trigger. Enemy head hitbox, I need to have this clicked. Is trigger clicked? And now it works. That was the thing we were missing. That's okay. That's why this debugging live is important. I like doing this. It helps us, work through things. You get to see the problem solving. This is trigger, needs to be checked, or else we can't trigger scripts. That's all there is to it. This box collider was not set up to trigger scripts. So now I'm going to click this, is trigger. Now this enemy will get that trigger will fire when I touch it. That only happened because I touched his head. So I'm going to change the head hitbox just to be a little smaller, actually. So right now his head hitbox is actually wider than his body hitbox. I'm going to narrow his head hitbox a little bit. And now we're going to do the same thing on our player. We'll add code to our player so that if it touches an object tagged with death, tagged with death, we'll go back to start. So I'm going to go to my player controller script, and I will see on trigger, enter collider 2D. No, let's do on collision enter. If collision.compare tag is death, so if I touch something that says death, then the transform dot position is going to equal quaternion identity right up here. We could just use this. This is quaternion identity basically just means 0 in terms of vectors, which is how we save transforms and rotations and some other properties. You don't need to totally internalize that. It's very early on. You will learn these things as we go. But this is basically saying if I touch death, my position should go to 0. 0 is the start. 0 is the starting point. Let's try this. Let's see if it works. Let's go to Unity. I'm expecting it to throw in an error. Usually I get an error the first time I save something. Player controller 77. So line 77 has an error. Oh, okay, I messed up my... Okay, I put an extra bracket at the end. That's fine. Save. Collision 2D does not contain a definition for compare tag. Collision 2D as opposed to a collider 2D. So we're going to actually change this a little bit. I will pull this out, and we're actually going to make a new thing that checks if it's triggering, and I'm actually going to add a trigger to my enemy. So basically what's going to happen here is it's going to be the same thing. So on trigger enter 2D, that's when I enter a trigger. It's going to check is that tagged with death, and if it is, then it'll transform my position to 0. So I will set my enemy hitbox to a trigger and try that. Now, if I set this to a trigger, I'm just going to show you guys. If I set this enemy hitbox to a trigger, trigger hitboxes, trigger colliders do not actually... Okay, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to fix this one. Lots of little things. It's all good. We're going to... Usually I would go to Unity documentation, look it up, but we're just going to ask ChatGPT. I need to set a game object's transform position to 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay. That should work. Transform.position, this might not work actually, because it might be a vector 2D. No, that should work. We trust ChatGPT. Okay, so my scene is working. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. That doesn't matter, Okay, we're going to play. So my enemy now falls straight through. That's because a trigger hitbox does not actually have a physical collider for the physics system. So we're going to actually have to not make him a trigger. We'll remove his def tag. We will give him a new hitbox. So I'll go to enemy, create empty. I'm going to call this hitbox. Let's call this danger hitbox. And I will add a component to this. I'll give it a box collider 2D. And this will be the hitbox that kills you. So if you land on this hitbox, you will die. And let's make the head hitbox a little wider, actually, now that, because this is actually really wide. Okay, I'm actually going to hit this X offset to 0, that'll center it. I'm going to hit this danger offset to 0, that'll center it. He's a little wide on his sprite, that's okay though. I'm going to hit play. And now if I touch him, he wasn't tagged with death. Danger hitbox did not have the death tag. Okay, now if I touch him, he is not tagged as a trigger. Danger hitbox needs this triggered. Okay, so now it's a trigger, it's tagged with death. Now I actually expect death is not defined. Oh, okay, the capitalization. So this is a capital D for death. This is a lowercase d for death. They need to be the same. There are, there's a standard thing, which is actually just to do everything in lowercase usually, and then if you're adding multiple words, you do future words in uppercase. There's different conditions to different things. Functions, everything should be uppercase. Anything that's a variable, it's usually the first thing is lowercase, and then the rest is every other word after that is uppercase. It's called camel font, but we're not, or camel type or something like that. We're not super worried about that right now, though. Just try to format things the same way you see other things formatted, and you'll do okay. Why did this not trigger? Okay. Danger hitbox. The tag is untagged. It needs to be tagged as death. The death is uppercase. My death is lowercase. My death needs to be uppercase. I need to save that. There's a lot of little things we need to make sure work for everything to work. So my danger hitbox is tagged with death. It is a trigger. Everything is saved. My death tag and my death tag are both uppercase. They have the same capitalization. So now hopefully I finally touch this guy and I go back to start. Start is over here inside of the floor. Let me actually just move the floor down a little bit so that it is not overlapping with... Actually, I'm going to leave the floor there. I'm going to move this ground down a little bit. Should be basically the same. No, we don't want to offset it from the grid. Okay, let's just move the grid down a little bit. I was just looking at some things. So I just moved the entire world down a little bit. So now, oh, I killed him by accident. I'm trying to show us something else, and I accidentally killed him. I landed right on his head. That's okay. We see that still works. I jump over him. I walk into him. I died. I jump over him. I walk into him. I died. I land on his head. He died. Now let's add movement to this enemy so that he just paces back and forth. So we will set, we'll create a new code, new script called enemy controller, oh my god, controller. And this one should be a little simpler than the player controller. Basically, I'm going to start by defining two variables. I'll say int left bound equals, actually I won't even declare it yet. I'll do public, that's what I'll do. I'll do public int left bound. Public means I'll be able to set it from inside of my game. Public int right bound. And this would be the left and right bounds of where he's patrolling to. And then I'll say, this will be weird, but I'll just use a Boolean. I'm just going to say bool going right equals true. So that just means at the start he's going to be going right. So when I start, we might not need to do anything. So let's go to update and let's say if going right, then let's use our same code for move right from player controller. If I'm going right, then I'm going to move right. If going, actually let's just say, instead of if, let's just say else. So else, he'll go in the negative direction. I need to give him public int move speed. This is how fast he's going to go. So if he's going right, he'll go to the right. Else, if he's not going right, he must be going left. So we'll just say go left. And then I need a condition to change whether he's going left or right. So we'll say if his transform dot, no, not crypto AI transform, what the heck? Transform dot position dot, we have a graph paper. This game is it's a piece of graph paper. This is our x. If our x is over here, then we're gonna do something. If our x is over here, then we're gonna do something else. He's gonna be moving left and right, is changing his x variable. He has an x value inside of him. It's a piece of graph paper. He also has a y. His y variable is how high up and down he is. His x variable is how far left and right he is. So if you look at my x is 9, if I set my x to, let's say, 0, my y to 0. If I set my x to 1, I'm at this first line. If I set my x to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, the game is on a piece of graph paper. What we want to do is we want to increase his x value to go right. We're going to say if his position dot x is greater than the right bound, then going right equals false. Now he's going to go left. He's reached his right boundary. Now he's going to go left. And we'll also say if transform position.x is greater than is actually less than his left bound. If he's farther left than his left boundary, then going right will be true again. This all looks good to me. Let's save it. Let's put it into my enemy and let's see what he does. So I saved that script. I'm going to go to my enemy. I will drag in my enemy controller. I need my variable access. Why don't I have my variable access? Did I not save my script? Public int, public int, public int. I should be able to change those ints. I have to change those ints. There is a, okay, the reason it's because it's not compiling. Where is this being used? So I have a glitch. RB does not exist in current context. I need to say enemy rigid body 2D. Rigid body 2D. How do I spell that? Rigid body, lowercase b, rigid body 2D.velocity.y. This is saying the velocity on his, actually I could just set these to 0. These don't matter. He's not moving up or down. That's how far up or down they're moving. I don't need that at all. Okay. Rigid body 2D dot velocity. That should be his rigid body, I believe. Let's see if it saves. Rigid body 2D does not. Okay, I need the reference to his rigid body. Let's ask ChatGPT. Normally I would look up Unity documentation, but this is just easier in the current era. I'm going to ask, how do I access a game object's rigid body component in a script? I need to tell the rigid body to add some velocity. Okay, we'll just do it this way. That's fine. And I'll set it back to RBs. RB, RB. Okay. That should be good enough. I'm just trying to get this to work so I can show us some stuff. Okay, it is compiling. Enemy controller is good. So let's say left bound. So I'm going to give him his boundaries now of where he's going to walk around. So let's say his left bound is 12. And let's say his right bound is 17 should be good. And now let's see what he does. He should be walking back and forth now, except he is not because I didn't fill out the script correctly. There was something I didn't put in here. Move speed should be 2. There's no rigid body attached to the enemy game object. There's no rigid body attached to the enemy game object. This is the rigid body. Oh, it's because I didn't specify that's a rigid body 2D. There we go. We're using a 2D, two-dimensional rigid body. The default rigid body is a 3D rigid body, and I didn't specify that. And now something else is happening. Compiler errors. Cannot implicitly... Okay. Private rigid body 2D get oh, there it is. Rigid body 2D. I need to specify that I'm working with 2D rigid bodies. The default rigid body is 3D. Alright, this is just about to be wrapped up. I'm going to hit play. We're going to have an enemy walking around. And if I have time, I don't know how much time I have left in this video. There he is. He's walking back and forth. Oh, he fell over. That's okay. He'll be okay. Ah! Okay, I killed him by accident. We'll do the same thing we did in player. We will just set his rotation so he doesn't fall over anymore. So player controller will set his rotation to 0. And we'll save that. And there's one more thing I want to do. It's called making prefabs. So I'll just show us this last thing, and then we're going to head out. But if this video might cut out soon. I need to check how long is on this recording. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. That's fine. So I'm going to turn this enemy into a prefab. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Assets. So we just spent a lot of time making this enemy. I don't want to make a bunch of more enemies. I'm going to turn him into a prefab, and this will let me quickly add many enemies to the game. I went to my Assets. I created a prefab folder. I'm going to call this prefabs, actually. Prefabs. I'm going to drag my enemy from here into the prefabs folder, and now I can just drag enemies onto the map wherever I want to put them. Now, the one thing I do need to affect on these enemies, I do need to set their bounds for each individual enemy. That is one thing I do need to specify. So this guy's bounds is going to be, let's say, -12, and we'll just estimate it, let's say 14, let's say -10. Let's say this guy will be from left bound will be 0, right bound will be, let's say, 5, and this guy, his left bound will be wherever he currently is, let's say 23, and his right bound will be, let's just say 26. Okay, so I created prefabs, I dragged them in, and I set their variables. So now, these enemies should all be instantiated. They should be wiggling back and forth in their positions, ready to fight. So I'll try to kill this guy. Oh, he killed me, whoops. I'll try to kill this guy, killed him. I'll try to kill this guy, killed him. I'll go kill this guy. Oh, he killed me, whoops. But you guys get the idea. The game is now working. We have working enemies. They interact in interesting ways with us. We can change all sorts of different things. There we go. I finally got on top of his head. I'm having a hard time with this jump for some reason. And there we go. Last guy's dead. Okay, cool. That is our finished working game. I'm going to save this. We now have enemies that are prefabbed that we can create many, many versions of. In my next video, maybe I will show us how to create maybe a collectible and a scoreboard, and maybe a little goal at the end. And maybe that'll be it for this little game. And then maybe you guys can modify it how you want to. But it's a simple little game, and the jump physics actually needs a lot of work. I really do not like how this is implemented. Something is feels horribly wrong with this. I've made other games that feel way better, but that's okay. That's all the time we have. You guys have fun with this. Play with it as much as you want.